This video is sponsored by Ugreen and their new GAN X100 4-port charger. Check out the link in the description to get 30% off today. Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and I feel like we have to talk about this because Apple Silicon has now been out for almost 2 years now. And if I look at the entire lineup, there's a lot that Apple has done here to restructure the Mac to make it make a lot more sense. We have new products like the Mac Studio that fit into this middle range of the Mac desktop lineup now, where before you really only had the options of choosing something really weak as your desktop like the previous Mac Minis that were on the Intel chipset systems, and then something outrageously expensive like a $6,000 Mac Pro. Well, Apple comes out, they kind of redefine this lineup with the Mac Studio, and even though there are really expensive configurations of that desktop computer, we're still talking about a $2,000 desktop computer at the base model, and while that is still expensive, it's a lot cheaper than going out and buying a $6,000 Mac. It is a Mac that now sits really in the middle and fulfills a role that Mac desktops basically have not fulfilled in a very long time, probably since the older Mac Pro was announced and they had some lower end Intel configurations. And when we look at Apple's laptop lineup, arguably, I mean, I don't even know if it's even arguably, the most important part of their Mac lineup, because Mac laptops outsell Mac desktops by a really large number. They are by far the most popular choice for most customers, but there's a strange laptop that still exists in this lineup, and one that I think maybe shouldn't really exist in the lineup. And that is, of course, the M1 MacBook Pro. Why do I think that this laptop over here is strange? Because at first glance, you may just think, okay, it is a more premium option of the M1 MacBook Air, and what's wrong with offering more options? We used to peg Apple, we used to ding them and say, hey, how come you don't offer more options? You should offer different price ranges, different options, different form factors, and maybe you consider this M1 MacBook Pro one of those options. But I think while it may have been fine when it was first released, I think the longer it sits here in the lineup, again, 550 days or more later, almost 2 years at this point, this product is really strange, and I'm not sure there's anyone who should really be looking to buy this product right now. But why is it so strange? What is it about this MacBook Pro that just really makes me question why it's still available in the lineup as we sit here today? Well, there's actually a couple of different reasons, and all of them just add up to the strangeness of this product. I would say the first thing about this product that is really strange to me is just the price point that it sits at right now with the features and specs that it has. So right now you're looking at a product that is $1,300, and it has a very, very similar design to what is offered by the M1 MacBook Air. Even though the MacBook Air has that tear-shaped kind of iconic wedge design, and this one kind of has more of a uniform design on it, they're kind of almost the same designed laptop. They both have pretty much the same limitations in their design. They both just have two Thunderbolt USB-C ports on the side over here, and then a headphone jack, and they're both pretty much thin and light, Ultrabook-like devices. Oh hey, you might have noticed a change of clothing because it's time to talk about something important, because no matter what Mac laptop you buy, you deserve something better than this charger. You deserve something that's even smaller, has more power, and has additional ports on the back. That's where Ugreen's Nexode 100-watt USB-C power brick comes in. This is using gallium nitride technology, which not only makes the power brick more energy efficient and generates less heat, but it also dramatically reduces its size. This is a full 100-watt charger, and it's still smaller than Apple's 61-watt charger, the one that comes with the M1 MacBook Pro, and it's dramatically smaller than the equivalent charger with the same exact wattage. This 100 watts enables fast charging for all of your Apple devices, and on top of that, Ugreen's charger has 4 different ports with 3 USB-C ports and 1 USB-A port, while the other guy just has 1 USB-C port. And this makes it great for at-home use where you can charge your MacBook, your iPhone, your Apple Watch, and even your AirPods all at the same time, all on one power brick. To save 30% on this Ugreen charger, check out the link in the description, and thank you so much to Ugreen for sponsoring this video.
Thank you for watching that sponsorship. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming where Greg didn't really have a good transition, so you're getting this and you're about to experience the awkward transition.
The MacBook Air weighs a little bit lighter, it's 2.8 pounds. This M1 MacBook Pro is 3 pounds, so really not too much to differentiate it there. On the inside, it gets even a little bit stranger because the M1 MacBook Air and the M1 MacBook Pro have the same exact processor. So the M1 MacBook Air could be fitted with the same exact 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU as what you can get inside of this MacBook Pro. And the only pro thing that is really driving the performance up in this laptop compared to the Air is that this has a spinning fan inside of the device. That means that when the M1 chip is working extra hard and it's getting hot, the fan can spin up, dissipate some of that heat, and prevent some of the thermal throttling that you might face on the M1 MacBook Air. But for most tasks, and arguably what these laptops are kind of aimed at for the customers buying them, it would be really hard to tell the difference between the power you get out of an M1 MacBook Air for everyday tasks and the power you get out of an M1 MacBook Pro. And even for advanced tasks like video editing, which I always use because I obviously edit videos for the YouTube channel, I can really use an M1 MacBook Air to do some of my video editing, and it performs very similar to the M1 MacBook Pro. But again, because you do have the fan, you will experience some benefits like faster export times, for example. But if you ask most people, the value of upgrading to this product, even back when it was released, it was questionable of if this product was worth the extra $300 that you would have to pay for the base model upgrading it from a MacBook Air. And now that the recent MacBook Pros are out, that value proposition is even stranger, because one of the things that people would argue when this product was released of maybe why it's worth that extra $300 is because it did come with another extra feature. And this is something that makes this product very weird. It comes with Apple's Touch Bar. So the Touch Bar is still fully on this 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, and that is probably one of the weirdest tidbits about this device right now. And why it's so weird is because Apple's recently released MacBook Pros, the higher end versions, the more premium $2,000 14-inch MacBook Pro, does not have a touch bar on it. It has a just traditional function key row, which is pretty much like the MacBook Air's function key row. So when you look at the rest of this lineup and you kind of look at the features, if you were like a normal customer walking into the store, looking at all these Apple laptops and comparing them, you would be really confused when you got to this product and started comparing it against the higher end MacBook Pro that exists right now, because you would see features like the touch bar and wonder, is this a more premium feature or is it a cheaper feature? But then you'd go look at the MacBook Air and you would see that there's a function key row there. So the feature set for this product really doesn't make a lot of sense now. The touch bar, obviously the writing's on the wall that these things are going away in all of the MacBooks. And there is no reason why this 13-inch MacBook Pro should still have a touch bar, especially when the more expensive version does not have this feature anymore. It's even stranger to me that when you actually take a good hard look at this MacBook Pro and you compare it directly against the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, that these devices really don't look anything alike. What makes this a MacBook Pro besides the fact that when you open it up and look at the bottom over here, it just says MacBook Pro? Really, that is the only thing indicating that this is the same type of device as the 14-inch MacBook Pro, because when you look at the outward designs, they are completely different. When you open them up, they're completely different. When you look at the internals and the design architecture, they are completely different. And you just look at everything about this product. You look at the keyboard, you look at the bezels around the device, and you really just start looking at the MacBook Air, this MacBook Pro, and then the higher end MacBook Pros. I think if you just took that branding away from the bottom of this device and you were asked to classify, does this belong in the MacBook Air lineup or does it belong in the MacBook Pro lineup? I think most people would say this belongs in the MacBook Air lineup. So what should happen next with this product, I think, is the big takeaway. Well, I think there's a couple of things that have to happen with this product, but it could move in either direction. So I think the first direction is to keep it a MacBook Pro. But to keep it a MacBook Pro, you have to start offering a lot of the same benefits that you can get on the higher end MacBook Pros. This should be an aspirational device. This should be a device that you maybe go in to buy the more expensive MacBook Pro, but you really go into the Apple store and you realize, okay, $2,000 for that product, it's overkill. It's way too much money for me. I can't afford it. There should be an option that is lower, somewhere around this $1,300, maybe a $1,500 starting price point where you can walk out and get a lot of the same features that you were going for with the MacBook Pro. So for starters, I think it has to have the same design. It has to have that 14-inch display. I think it should only have one smaller end configuration, not a 16-inch model. And it should have that same notch display as the 14-inch MacBook Pro. It should also have a lot of the same features as that MacBook Pro. So it shouldn't just have two Thunderbolt USB-C ports. It should borrow the same design as the 14-inch model, make it flatter, have that kind of thicker looking design, and then incorporate some more ports into this design. Give it two Thunderbolt ports with the HDMI port, with the SD card slot, and also the MagSafe charger. Giving it more ports like that would really solidify this device as being targeted more towards pro customers. I think Apple could take those steps to really make this device more like the MacBook Pro, and they could still cut features from this device to save on price. They don't have to give it the same cooling system as what you get on the 14-inch model if it's just powering the weaker chipsets. You don't have to add the mini LED display onto the base model MacBook Pro. That could be an aspirational move up as you start to spec out the higher end MacBook Pro options. The other move for this device is to lean in more into the MacBook Air side. Now, I wouldn't call a re-release product of this something that's more targeted towards mid-level consumers, I guess. Not pro, not entry-level, maybe somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't call it a MacBook Air, but maybe take the time to rebrand this as the basic MacBook. You have that name sitting there. You have all these different classifiers for different MacBooks with the Air and the Pro. Why not take the time to redesign this as the middle point of the lineup and just call it a standard MacBook? Take different specifications from the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro and combine them into a device where most people would feel comfortable using it. So again, I think like the MacBook Pro design, it has to have more ports. So I would add more ports onto that type of device, but maybe if it's just called a MacBook, you expect the Pro level configurations on this device. So it wouldn't have to support 32 gigabytes of memory. It wouldn't have to support an M2 Pro chip. It could just stay on that regular M2 chip, and that would be enough of an expectation of performance for this type of consumer level device. Now, I know this isn't like a traditional review or a review type video, more of kind of like my thoughts on the MacBook lineup in general right now, but there's probably a few of you wondering, do I still recommend the M1 MacBook Pro as it stands today? Listen, there are benefits to going with the M1 MacBook Pro. The display is a little bit brighter. The battery life on it is a little bit better than the MacBook Air. It's actually even better than the 14-inch MacBook Pro model if we're gonna talk about the real benefits of this lower powered chip. And listen, if you're like a die-hard fan of like the Touch Bar, and you've always wanted a Touch Bar Mac, or maybe like a weird design and you want to get a weirder design before Apple discontinues the Touch Bar from the rest of the Macs, then maybe if you really need those extra benefits over the Air, maybe I'd still consider purchasing it, especially if you can find it at a discount on a third-party site like Amazon instead of buying it full price at Apple. Then sure, I could still recommend the M1 MacBook Pro. I mean, this is still a great device when we're talking about laptops. All the Apple Silicon products at this point have just been really good. But I think it takes a very special kind of use case for this product to really pick it over the MacBook Air. And then the more you spec out this device, the worse value it becomes. So if you're adding on memory, if you're adding on storage, the price point starts to get very close to the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And at that point, I would just say, go spend a little bit of the extra money, get yourself a 14-inch MacBook Pro. You're gonna get a much better device. It's going to deliver a much better value. So yeah, the M1 MacBook Pro, it's a strange product, the strangest Apple laptop in the lineup right now. And something here needs to change, and I hope it changes very, very soon. But hey, if you like this video and you agree with me that this laptop is very strange, give me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.